Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating subject, China's truly unique relationship with its own history.
Hmm.
And this isn't just about, dates and names. It's really about how the past isn't some distant, dusty thing over there.
Right.
In China, history feels like a living, breathing force that's, well, actively shaping the present,
Right?
from ancient times up to today.
That's absolutely right. And for this deep dive, our material comes from a recent lecture by a leading expert on Chinese history.
Okay.
And it offers this really captivating, multifaceted look at how history, culture, even politics, how they're all intertwined in China. It gives us some, well, surprising insights into how a civilization can actually sustain itself for millennia.
So our mission today is to really try and unpack how history isn't just part of Chinese civilization,
Yeah.
but maybe, in many fundamental ways, it is Chinese civilization itself.
That's a great way to put it.
So, okay, when we talk about this incredible span of Chinese history, one thing just jumps out immediately.
Hmm.
China is arguably the only ancient civilization that has, well, continuously existed. I mean, just think about that for a second.
Staggering.
Right.
Yeah.
While empires like Rome, Mesopotamia, Egypt rose and fell, you've got this one civilization with an unbroken thread stretching back thousands of years. What does that incredible continuity tell us?
Well, that continuity is precisely what makes Chinese history such a uniquely valuable field for historians. And it's why history plays such a far greater, more central role for the Chinese people than it does for, well, almost any other nation you can think of.
Mm.
If you want to really grasp modern China, you'll find that understanding its ancient past isn't just helpful, it's absolutely essential.
Right.
All the fundamental building blocks, its culture, its language, its core philosophies, they were all laid down thousands of years ago, and they still echo really powerfully today.
And it's not just about that long-term survival, is it? I'm curious, how early did this deep fascination with antiquity actually begin? Was it always there, this looking back?
It's astonishingly early. I mean, our sources mention this great anecdote, Neolithic jade artifacts found in Chang royal tombs.
Neolithic. Wow. When was that?
We're talking as far back as the 13th century BCE.
Oh, okay.
And this wasn't just accidental, like finding old stuff. It shows a clear form of collecting antiquities.
Really?
Yeah, people appreciating objects simply because they were old, because they were from a revered past. And that predates anything similar in the Roman Empire by, well, over 1,000 years.
That's incredible, 1,000 years earlier. So this appreciation for old objects, how did that evolve? Did it become more formal?
It did. That ancient trend, it sort of morphed into a really sophisticated academic discipline. From the 10th century CE onwards, we see the emergence of Jinshi.
Jinshi.
Yeah, it translates roughly as the study of bronze and stone inscriptions. But imagine a discipline that was part ancient history, part archaeology, and even part forensic science.
Forensic science, why?
Well, because scholars had to be sharp enough to spot the forgeries. There was a thriving industry in fakes, even back then.
Huh, okay, so it wasn't just academic ivory tower stuff.
Not at all. It was this blend of scholarly inquiry and very practical authentication. You needed a good eye.
And, here's another curious parallel that kind of resonates even today. The use of dragon bones in traditional Chinese medicine,
Yes, the longu.
which were, in fact, fossilized bones, right?
Exactly. Fossil bones of extinct mammals, mostly.
What's really mind-bending is how some 16th century texts, like the big one, the Benkao Gengmu by Li Shizhen,
A monumental work.
how they described finding these dragon bones. The descriptions are so meticulous. They talk about where to find skulls, vertebrae.
Yeah.
There are even illustrations that look strikingly like, say, a triceratops skull or a mummified crocodile paw.
It's fascinating. It wasn't just folklore. It reflects this kind of proto-scientific curiosity, doesn't it?
Yeah, a really deeply ingrained interest in observing and categorizing the ancient world, even through the lens of medicine.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Now, shifting focus a bit from these tangible artifacts to the more philosophical side,
Okay.
it's really worth noting how history in China seemed to function almost as a substitute for religion in some ways.
A substitute for religion. That sounds like a big claim. How so?
Well, think about traditional Chinese religions like Taoism or Buddhism. They often inspired more practical devotion,
Like visit a temple for a specific favor, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Less about a strong, exclusive religious sentiment like you might find in many Western traditions. And one result of that was very few actual religious wars throughout Chinese history.
Interesting point.
So this created a kind of a void, maybe.
Yeah.
And history seemed to step in to fill it, to provide that shared narrative, that sense of identity and continuity.
Okay, I think I see what you mean. But how did this historical focus actually filter down? How did it permeate everyday life, even for the common person, maybe someone who couldn't even read?
That's a fantastic question, because it really gets to the power of oral tradition.
Ah, storytellers.
Precisely. For the common person, history came alive through professional storytellers, known as shushu. And these weren't just telling any old tales. They almost exclusively recounted historical stories.
Wow.
I mean, consider this. 3 of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Water Margin, even The Fantastical Journey to the West,
Yeah.
they all grew directly out of these historical oral traditions. Even when the stories themselves became, wildly imaginative, the roots were often historical.
So history as entertainment, basically, but also as a shared cultural narrative. That's incredible.
Exactly. And it wasn't just storytellers. Think about traditional musical drama,
Wow.
what people often mistakenly just call Peking opera.
Right.
It similarly relied heavily on historical plots or clear historical ties. Even really emotional famous narratives like Hegemon bids farewell to his concubine. That's anchored in specific historical events and figures.
So what you're saying is even illiterate peasants would have picked up a huge amount of history just through these popular forms.
An astonishing amount, yes. You can maybe compare it to how European peasants in the Middle Ages would know the lives of saints and martyrs. It was just part of the cultural air they breathed.
It's incredible how deep that goes. But this shared understanding, it wasn't just for entertainment, was it? It must have played a huge role in forging something bigger, like China's national identity.
Absolutely crucial.
Because China is so diverse, right? Geographically, climatically, linguistically. I mean, people in the north and south might not even understand each other's dialects.
Exactly. Huge diversity. Yet there's this powerful overarching identity of being Chinese. Zongoran often linked back to being descendants of the mythical Yellow Emperor.
So how did history help create that unity across such diversity?
Well, here's a really thought-provoking observation from our source material.
Okay.
The argument is that in China, consciousness determines being.
Consciousness determines being. What does that mean in this context?
It means the shared belief in unity, a belief deeply rooted in these common historical narratives, and this idea of a shared ancestry. That belief actually helped create and maintain the unified state.
So the idea of unity itself helped make unity real.
In a way, yes. It's kind of contrary to some traditional historical thinking that might focus more on, say, material factors or geography. It suggests the power of a shared historical idea to shape political reality.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Now, if we think about who was actually writing all this history down.
The elite.
Yes, and the Chinese educated elite was almost always synonymous with the bureaucracy. The scholars were the officials, and the officials were the scholars.
The scholar official class.
Exactly. And their education was remarkably homogeneous. It centered almost entirely on historical texts and, crucially, the ability to understand ancient writings, ancient characters.
So everyone who mattered, politically speaking, shared this deep historical grounding.
Pretty much. It created a very specific, historically minded intellectual and administrative class.
Okay, so what was the practical application then? How did these officials actually use this historical knowledge in their day-to-day work, especially when dealing with, say, a difficult superior or even the emperor? You couldn't just say, "You're wrong."
Right, definitely not directly. And that's where it gets really clever.
How?
Officials would often cite historical precedents. They'd pull out stories from classic texts like the Anecdotes of States or the Discourses of the Warring States.
So using analogy.
Precisely. It was a subtle but incredibly powerful way to offer advice or warnings without directly confronting power.
Like, Your Majesty, that reminds me of a situation Duke Huan faced back in the 7th century BCE, and here's what happened, kind of thing.
Exactly that kind of thing. It allowed for indirect critique, for guidance wrapped in historical wisdom. Very sophisticated.
Okay, let's talk about a specific turning point, the Han Dynasty.
Ah, yes, the Han. Hugely important, starting around 202 BCE.
It was the first really long-lasting empire, wasn't it? Over 400 years.
Correct. And its emerging imperial bureaucracy, those scholar officials we just talked about, they quickly grasped how beneficial a unified empire was.
Beneficial for whom?
Well, beneficial for the state, but also very much beneficial for their own power and status.
Right. A stable, large empire needs a large bureaucracy.
Exactly. And so Someone like Emperor Wu of Han, who reigned for a long time and is often seen as this great reformer,
Yeah.
his actions, in many ways, actually reflected this collective will, this desire of the powerful bureaucracy for a strong, centralized, unified state. He was kind of embodying their aspirations.
That makes sense. And this period also gives us one of the most important historical works ever written, right? Sima Qian.
Sima Qian, yes.
Mhm.
The Records of the Grand Historian, or Shiji. Foundational stuff.
It was the first really comprehensive history of China, wasn't it? Covering everything from, like, legend up to his own time.
That's right. And what's so compelling, beyond just the scope, is how meticulously Sima Qian crafted a narrative.
The narrative, meaning...
Meaning he didn't just list facts. He presented the Han unification, the creation of this empire, as the inevitable, logical outcome of all prior Chinese history.
Ah, so history with a purpose, a direction.
Definitely. It was a grand, purposeful story leading right up to the glory of the Han.
And his work was hugely influential.
Immensely. Not only was it brilliant for its time, I mean, his methodology, his use of sources, was incredibly sophisticated. But there's also a paradox.
Oh.
Sima Qian himself had conflicts later in life with Emperor Wu. He suffered castration as a punishment.
Right, I remember that.
So his work carried this aura of being somewhat dissident, or at least written by someone who wasn't just a court lackey.
Ah, so that gave it extra credibility.
Exactly. That combination, brilliance, perceived impartiality, a touch of independent spirit, made his text incredibly persuasive. He essentially created the traditional view of early Chinese history.
And that view is still powerful today.
So powerful that even now, when new archaeological evidence comes up that contradicts Sima Qian, it remains a significant hurdle for scholars to challenge that deeply embedded narrative. His story is just woven into the cultural consciousness.
Wow. And just one final point on this section, the sheer amount of historical writing in China.
Oh, it's staggering. Absolutely staggering.
Compared to, say, ancient Greece or Rome, where sources can be pretty scarce for certain periods.
Right. In China, you often have an abundance of historical texts, multiple accounts, official histories, private histories.
Why so much?
Largely because historical writing was seen as a very high prestige activity. It was considered a perfectly respectable, even noble thing for retired officials and scholars to do.
So they just kept writing.
And writing and writing, creating this incredibly rich, dense historical record.
Okay, so if history is so vital, so foundational, what happens when new discoveries come along and potentially rewrite parts of that history?
Ah, well, that brings us right up to the modern day.
Let's talk about the explosion in Chinese archaeology.
Yes, it's really a golden age, thanks to massive state funding, but also, ironically, thanks to constant construction projects.
Salvage archaeology, right. Digging before the bulldozer moves in.
Exactly. It means there are incredibly significant discoveries being made, well, almost every year.
Like what kind of discoveries?
Huge numbers of ancient texts, for example.
Yeah.
Written on fragile bamboo slips or silk, things that just didn't survive elsewhere.
And what do these new texts tell us?
Well, the implications can be profound. They can directly challenge those long-held narratives we talked about.
Can you give an example?
Sure. There were recently discovered documents from officials who served the Qin dynasty, the one before the Han, often portrayed as uniquely brutal.
Right, the bad guys in the traditional story.
Kind of. But these documents reveal that many Han dynasty laws, the ones always praised as being simpler and more humane, were often almost identical to the supposedly brutal Qin laws they replaced.
No kidding. So the Han just copied the Qin laws but gave themselves better PR.
That seems to be part of it. It directly contradicts the traditional narrative passed down by, well, Han dynasty historians like Sima Qian.
Wow. So archaeology is constantly correcting and enriching the picture.
Constantly. It's a dynamic field, really pushing the boundaries of our understanding.
And here's something particularly compelling, almost mysterious. A significant number of China's most promising archaeological sites, including the really big ones, the imperial mausoleums, like Qin Shi Huang's tomb.
The one with the terracotta army.
Right. They remain unexcavated. People might not realize the terracotta army itself was actually a peripheral find, wasn't it?
That's correct. It's amazing, but it's just one part of a massive tomb complex. The central tomb mound itself hasn't been touched.
And it's believed to contain incredibly rich finds, maybe even entire libraries.
That's the speculation. Based on historical accounts, like Sima Qian's description, it could be unbelievable. Mercury rivers, models of palaces, astronomical ceilings.
Yeah.
And yes, potentially texts.
So why haven't they excavated it? Or other similar imperial tombs?
Well, The official reason given, and it's a valid concern,
Yeah.
is that current technology might not be adequate to preserve everything that could be found. Imagine opening a tomb and finding incredibly fragile silks, painted lacquerware, or bamboo texts that could just disintegrate the moment they hit the air.
Ah, okay, preservation challenges.
Exactly. There have been instances in the past where artifacts were damaged or lost because the preservation techniques weren't ready right at the moment of discovery, so they're being cautious.
But that caution also creates this incredible sense of potential, right? An intriguing future for archaeology.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It means that new discoveries could emerge in the coming decades that might fundamentally reshape our understanding of ancient Chinese history all over again. Imagine what we might uncover down the road.
It's fascinating. Now, this brings us directly to the political significance of history today.
Very relevant.
Particularly in the post-Mao era, say the last few decades, there seems to be a clear shift towards using history as a kind of backbone for nationalism.
Yes, that's definitely observable.
You see it in big initiatives like Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. It's explicitly framed as a revival of the ancient Silk Road, right?
Right. Harking back to a perceived golden age of Chinese influence and connectivity.
Or the whole concept of the Chinese dream. That seems deeply rooted in the idea of China's ancient, often portrayed as superior, civilization returning to its, quote, rightful place in the world.
Absolutely. History provides the narrative, the legitimacy, the sense of destiny for these contemporary political goals.
But what does this mean for historians working in China? Are there constraints?
Well, it's important to understand that while the quality of Chinese historical scholarship is often incredibly high,
Yeah.
academic freedom can sometimes be constrained by these political considerations. There are certain red lines.
Can you give an example of that tension?
A notable one was the state-sponsored Xia Shangzu Chronology Project back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, wait, what was that about?
It aimed to establish precise dates for the earliest Chinese dynasties, including the Xia dynasty.
The Shia, isn't that considered legendary by many scholars, lacking direct proof?
By most scholars outside China, yes, because there are no written records from that exact period that confirm its existence in the way we have the later Shang dynasty.
Yeah.
We have later texts talking about the Xia, but not contemporary proof.
So what did the project conclude?
It controversially accepted the Xia dynasty as historically real and assigned it precise dates, effectively pushing China's documented history further back.
So reflecting a political desire for a longer, continuous history.
That's how many observers interpreted it. It highlights this ongoing tension between, let's say, purely scientific historical research based on verifiable evidence and the political usefulness of certain historical narratives.
Okay, so with all these discoveries, these political currents, these ongoing debates, what does this mean for the basic timeline of ancient China? Where does it even begin and end?
That's a great question to wrap things up.
Traditionally, ancient China is often said to end with the fall of the Han Dynasty, right? Around 220 CE.
That's the common marker, yes. But if we think about that theme of continuity,
Yeah.
you could argue, as our source material does, that it makes more sense to extend ancient China a bit further, perhaps through the Three Kingdoms period that followed the Han.
Which adds another, 60 years or so?
Roughly. Because even though the empire had fragmented, the key players during the Three Kingdoms era still largely saw themselves as working to restore the Han.
So the idea of the Han Empire still dominated their thinking.
Exactly. And many cultural and bureaucratic continuities persisted. The real dark ages in China, if you want to call them that, a period of deeper fragmentation, urban decay, loss of literacy in some areas, arguably came a bit later.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's turn to the beginning. That phrase you hear everywhere, 5,000 years of Chinese history.
Yes. Ubiquitous.
Is it actually accurate, historically speaking?
Well, that's where it gets complicated and touches on what we just discussed about politics and tradition.
How?
I mean, if you look at the archaeology, Homo erectus was on Chinese territory maybe 1.7 million years ago. Agriculture starts developing around 8,000 years ago.
Right.
Actual written records, the kind historians rely on for solid proof, date back about 3,300 years to the Shang dynasty oracle bones.
So where does the 5,000 years come from?
It's essentially a politically and traditionally selected figure. It aligns nicely with the mythical Yellow Emperor and other legendary sage kings who are said to have founded Chinese civilization.
But rulers for whom we don't have contemporary written sources.
Correct. We have later accounts about them, but not texts from their supposed time. So choosing 5,000 years clearly shows a preference, especially in contemporary political discourse, for these traditional narratives, sometimes prioritized over what can be strictly verified by, say, archaeology alone.
So it's a cultural truth, maybe, more than a strictly archaeological one?
That's a good way to put it. It reflects the power of that historical narrative.
You know, what really stands out to me from our whole conversation is just how profoundly unique China's relationship with its past truly is.
Mhm.
It's not just a subject you study in school. It feels like a living tradition, doesn't it? A guide for how to govern, a source of national identity, this deep cultural force.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems ingrained in the very fabric of the society in a way that's hard to find parallels for.
It really is.
And that leads to a final, maybe provocative thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Given this constant flow of new archaeological discoveries and the ongoing, very real political importance of history in China today, what new understandings of its ancient past might be just over the horizon? And maybe more importantly, how will those new insights continue to shape China's future? What will the next few decades reveal about this remarkable civilization? And how will that challenge or maybe confirm our current perspectives?
That's a fascinating question to end on. What will the next discovery be, and what ripple effects will it have?
We'll have to wait and see.
Well, we encourage all of you listening to perhaps explore this topic further and maybe reflect a little on how your own culture's past shapes its present, maybe in ways you hadn't considered. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a place many of us think we know, but, well, often misunderstand. You see, when we talk about China, it's incredibly easy to fall into the trap of seeing it as this singular, monolithic entity, one culture, one people, one history.
Right.
But what if I told you that was perhaps the biggest misconception of all?
It's absolutely true. The layers, the sheer vastness, the hidden complexities of China's internal landscape are truly staggering.
Yeah.
What we're doing today is really digging into how China's physical environment, its incredible population, and the often surprising, sometimes, well, stark demographic policies have profoundly shaped its history and its vibrant present.
Exactly. When I first thought about tackling China's geography, I admit dry textbook kind of came to mind.
Yeah, I get that.
But as we started pulling together these sources, it became incredibly clear just how much the physical landscape shapes everything else from culture to politics. Understanding why one part of China is different from another and why people live one way in one place and another way elsewhere, that's absolutely crucial. It's the skeleton, upon which everything else is built.
And we're going to make sure it's anything but dry. Our sources for this deep dive are a fascinating transcript of a lecture on Chinese geography, which really unveils some truly surprising facts and crucial nuggets of knowledge.
Okay.
Get ready to have your understanding of China, well, thoroughly deepened.
All right, let's start by just grasping the sheer scale of China. On a map, it's enormous. We're talking over 9.5 million square kilometers. That makes it the third largest country by area globally, right after Russia and Canada.
That's right. And maps can be deceiving. While it might not always look it on a flat projection, China is actually only a little more than 1.5 times smaller than Russia.
Wow.
Which is, as you can imagine, a substantial amount of land. A lot.
But really, when most of us think of China, it's not primarily about its physical size, is it?
No, not usually.
It's about its defining characteristic, its population. And on that front, China is the undeniable global leader.
Absolutely. The numbers are truly staggering. The 2010 census put China's population at 1.339 billion people.
1.339 billion.
Okay. By 2019, estimates suggested it had already surpassed 1.4 billion. The 2020 census, as you might recall, was postponed.
Right, yeah. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Chinese demographics involve such immense numbers that they seem to sort of defy typical statistical laws.
They really do.
We even hear that the 2010 census was semi-officially recognized as incomplete.
Indeed. There's an unofficial, widely held belief among experts that China likely holds around 1.5 billion people today.
1.5 billion.
It's a fifth of the Earth's population, though India is rapidly catching up, of course. What's particularly fascinating here is the inherent unreliability of Chinese statistics, really stemming from the absence of independent institutions. This has led to two wildly different viewpoints. Some argue China's population is actually much smaller, believing the official numbers are deliberately inflated for, prestige.
Right.
Others believe it's far larger, with some estimates going up to 2.2 billion based on analyses like consumer goods consumption.
2.2 billion? That's huge.
Yeah.
So what's your take on these wildly divergent numbers? Is there a more believable range?
It's a great question, and it really highlights the challenge of getting a clear picture here. While both extremes are probably a bit much, I'm more inclined to believe the higher end, perhaps somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion.
Really? Why?
Well, it's plausible that the Chinese government actually has reasons to understate its population figures rather than inflate them.
Interesting.
Historically, East Asia and China in particular has always been densely populated. Estimates suggest that around 1000 AD, China held approximately one-third of the entire world population.
A third. Wow. And it sounds like a large population has always been a bit of a double-edged sword for Chinese rulers.
Oh, definitely.
A valuable tax base and a huge military pool on one hand,
Right.
but a constant source of potential instability and peasant wars on the other.
Exactly. And unlike what many of us might have learned, for example, in the context of Marxist theory, peasant wars in China did often succeed.
They did.
Yes. When you have so many people, pushing them too far means no army, no matter how large, can contain them. You'll just be swept away. This imposed a unique set of constraints on Chinese rulers throughout history. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were particularly tough, as rapid population growth combined with a struggling economy led to widespread hunger.
Which brings us directly to one of the most remarkable and, at times, let's face it, brutal social experiments in human history. China's demographic policies, particularly the infamous one-child policy.
Right.
The need for birth control was recognized almost immediately after the communists came to power, wasn't it?
That's right. The first serious attempt at population control began under Mao Zedong in the late 1950s and early 1960s. This included measures like the sterilization of men and women, especially after their third child, a policy that intensified after the devastating Great Famine.
Right.
However, during the Cultural Revolution, these controls largely ceased. Mao, somewhat controversially, viewed a large population as China's superweapon, believing it could even withstand, a nuclear war.
Wow.
Let's see.
Quite a view. So how did that transition into the stringent one-child policy we're all familiar with?
Well, after Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping came to power. China's population was nearing 1 billion. It was overwhelmingly young, very poor, and constant hunger was a looming threat.
So the pressure was immense.
Immense. The one-child policy was introduced as an integral part of his sweeping reforms, and it was, as our sources describe, incredibly strict, extremely harsh, really.
And when you say strict, what did that actually look like in terms of daily life and enforcement? I mean, for ordinary people.
Okay, so the general rule was one child for urban families. In rural areas, a second child was permitted if the first was a girl. This was largely due to traditional agrarian values and the desire for male heirs who could work the land.
Right.
Enforcement in the 1970s and 80s was indeed severe. There was widespread forced contraception for women after their first child, mandatory abortions after the second, and forced sterilizations.
Forced. Wow.
For party members and state employees, the rules were even more draconian, often leading to forced procedures after their first child.
Good grief. What about national minorities? Were they exempt from these rules?
It was complex and often contradictory. Officially, there were some exemptions, but there's considerable evidence of forced sterilization among groups like the Uyghurs, despite those official declarations. Then, in the 1990s, the policy began to soften somewhat. Criminal prosecution for additional children was replaced by heavy fines.
So you could essentially buy the right to have more kids.
Basically, yes. This made having more children an expensive but feasible option for the wealthy, effectively turning extra children into a kind of luxury good.
So what does this all mean for China's demographics today? What were the truly unforeseen consequences of such a sweeping policy? I mean, beyond just slowing the birth rate.
Well, officially, the policy certainly succeeded in slowing growth. The population grew only about 1.5 times in 45 years, which is several times less than it would have without the policy. However, the primary reason for its abandonment in 2015 was a severe imbalance in the age composition.
The aging problem.
Exactly. That massive young workforce that fueled China's economic reforms in the 70s and 80s is now retiring, creating a significant risk of having too many pensioners and too few workers.
Like Japan, but
Similar to Japan, but crucially, China lacks Japan's robust infrastructure, its high savings rates, or its general standard of living to cope with this challenge. It's a huge looming issue.
that sounds like a ticking demographic time bomb. What about other, perhaps more hidden consequences?
One very significant and heartbreaking issue is what are called black children, or Heihaizi.
Hey, Z.
Yes. These are unregistered children, mostly girls, who were hiding from authorities to avoid losing the chance to have a boy later.
Oh my goodness.
In 2000, estimates put this number at around 8 million, though it's very likely much higher. These children, from a legal point of view, simply don't exist.
They don't exist.
Legally, no. This leaves them incredibly vulnerable to forced marriages, being sold into brothels, and just general hardship. Even today, you'll still see propaganda in rural areas like, a girl is also a child, indicating the persistence of this deep-seated issue.
That's truly sobering. And then there's the widely known gender imbalance, isn't there? That's another major consequence.
Yes, absolutely. There are approximately 70 million more men than women in China.
70 million.
It's a direct result of sex-selective abortions, which, unlike in India, are not as strictly prosecuted in China.
Right.
What this means on a human level is that 10–20% of young men face very dim prospects of finding a partner.
20%.
And here's where it gets ironically interesting. Parents of daughters now feel absolutely calm because their girls are in incredibly high demand for marriage. A complete flip.
Wow, what a turnaround. Okay, moving beyond the numbers. It's vital to challenge that idea of China as a homogeneous entity. You said earlier the biggest mistake is seeing it as just one thing.
Absolutely. That's a crucial point. While Han Chinese do make up the vast majority, about 91.5% of the population.
Which is still huge.
Oh, it's enormous.
Yeah.
But the remaining 8.5% still represents a truly considerable number of people given China's overall scale. We're talking well over 100 million people.
Right.
Officially, China recognizes 56 national minorities, including even a small population of Russians. In reality, the actual number of distinct groups is likely higher, as Chinese ethnography often groups related peoples under broader categories.
So let's explore some of these diverse groups to truly understand China's internal tapestry. Let's maybe start with the non-Han peoples in the south.
Okay. In southern China, you find a remarkable array of non-Han populations. Take the Zhuang, for example. They constitute 1.3% of the population, or about 18 million people. That's enough for a not-so-small European nation, right?
18 million, yeah.
These groups boast incredibly ancient histories, with independent states flourishing in Yunnan for centuries, Nanzhao, the Dali Empire, well before many European nations even began to form their modern identities.
Really?
Oh, yes. Some even had unique writing systems, like the Naxi people's pictographic and syllabic mnemonic scripts, which were used for sacred texts. These are truly ancient peoples with histories longer than many European peoples.
That's fascinating.
Unfortunately, their modern lives sometimes see them reduced to, well, purely tourist attractions, performing traditional rituals for visitors.
That's sad. It's sobering to hear how some of these ancient cultures are struggling. And speaking of groups whose stories often remain untold, or maybe are becoming more known now, what about the Uyghurs of Xinjiang? Their situation has garnered significant international attention.
Yes, the Uyghurs, numbering somewhere between 11 and 15 million in China, reside in Xinjiang, a term that literally means new frontier, and is, in essence, a colonial term.
New frontier. Okay.
Their integration into China was relatively late in the 18th century, and they experienced brief periods of self-governance in the 20th century. Their story, like many national minorities in China, is quite sad, marked by harsh measures during demographic restrictions.
And the current situation?
The current situation is dire, according to many reports. There are accounts of re-education camps for those with relatives abroad, Arabic names or long beards, often for unlimited time. Army patrols are common, and there's been the destruction of mosques and traditional cemeteries.
And their culture seems to be under direct assault as well, particularly their language.
Yes. Children under 15 are reportedly required to change Arabic names to Chinese. Uyghur language teaching has virtually ceased in schools, replaced by forced Chinese language instruction, a drastic shift from just 15 years ago, when many Uyghurs only began learning Chinese maybe in university. Demographically, since 2018, truly harsh measures have apparently led to a 5-fold drop in the birth rate among Uyghurs, which is now even below the regional Han Chinese rate.
A 5-fold drop.
Yes. Forced contraception and sterilization reportedly continue, with the official goal seemingly being zero population growth for Xinjiang, primarily at the expense of the Uyghurs.
It's a stark contrast to other groups.
Yeah.
What about Tibetans? They have a strong international voice, don't they? Largely thanks to the Dalai Lama.
Yes, Tibetans, around 6 million in China, have a unique mountainous homeland in the southwest, historically isolated. They formally submitted to Beijing in the late 18th century, but remained de facto independent until 1952.
Right.
Their prominent international voice is largely due to the Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan Administration. While their situation is perhaps maybe slightly better than Xinjiang, they still face challenges like unequal access to medicine and forced settlement of nomadic Tibetans.
And historically,
Historically, Tibetans were known as some of the harshest nomadic warriors, whose resilience was forged by their extremely harsh climate. It makes the very existence of a Tibetan empire, which controlled vast territories, seem like quite a miracle, really.
and what about the Mongols? We hear less about them in the context of China.
True. There are 6 million Mongols in China, which is actually more than in Mongolia itself.
More than in Mongolia.
Yes. They are rarely mentioned in the press, largely because their demographic decline in Inner Mongolia due to colonization has been so dramatic. They went from about a third of the population to a negligible percentage today.
Wow.
They were also a primary target during the truly genocidal acts of the Cultural Revolution, a very difficult history.
Then there are the Manchus, who famously ruled China for centuries as the Qing dynasty. How have they fared in the modern era?
The Manchus are a special ethnic group in China. Officially, they number 10.4 million, but it's practically just a number due to extreme assimilation.
Just a number.
Pretty much. This process began during their own Qing dynasty, leading many to no longer know their language by the early 20th century. Post-revolution, they were often perceived as counter-revolutionaries, causing many to change their names to hide their identity.
That's incredible. Assimilation during their own rule.
It is, and a truly shocking detail from the source material. Only 3 people in the village of Sanjiazi still speak Manchu fluently, all over 80 years old.
3 people.
It's a language on the very brink of extinction.
Wow. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What about the Hui, the Chinese Muslims? How are they distinct?
The Hui number around 10.5 million and are distinct primarily by their Islamic faith. They are absolutely Sinicized in language and culture, yet neither Han Chinese nor Hui consider them simply Han who adopted Islam. It's a distinct identity.
Okay.
They are quite visible, with Muslim cafes and eateries in almost every Chinese city.
Right, I've seen those.
However, they too are facing increasing unpleasantness recently, as many repressive measures reportedly applied to Uyghurs are also being extended to Chinese Muslims, with Islam increasingly seen as hostile to the PRC. And here's a truly fascinating linguistic quirk. The Hui traditionally used Zhaojing, which is Chinese written using Arabic script.
Chinese in Arabic script.
Exactly. It's not just a curiosity, it perfectly embodies their unique identity, showing how they blend deep Chinese roots with their Islamic faith. And it proves that Chinese doesn't have to be written with traditional characters. There are other ways.
That's amazing. So even among the dominant Han Chinese, who are over 90%, there's incredible internal variety, isn't there? We certainly shouldn't think of them as a single fist, as the saying goes.
Exactly. You've nailed it. The Han Chinese are perhaps the most non-homogeneous, most non-uniform ethnic group you could imagine.
Really? How so?
Primarily, it's seen in their linguistic diversity. There are 7 to 14 major dialect groups. And the term dialect is actually quite weak here because the differences are as vast as those between, say, Slavic languages like Russian and Czech.
Wow. So not just accents, but different grammar.
Distinct grammar, different word order, huge vocabulary differences. Many linguists outside China would absolutely consider these to be separate languages. For instance, Cantonese. Linguistically, it's arguably closer to Vietnamese than it is to standard Mandarin Chinese itself.
Closer to Vietnamese. Okay, that really puts it in perspective.
So Putonghua, or Mandarin, the official language, wasn't always the common tongue for everyone across China. That seems obvious now.
Not at all. Putonghua, when it was introduced, wasn't native to anyone, and is still not for many, many people. A huge number of people still speak their local dialects day to day.
Right.
Only a few exceptions, like Cantonese in Hong Kong and Minnan in Taiwan, have really thriving literature, media, and official support.
So here's a profound insight, I think. The unity of the Chinese people, despite all this incredible diversity, is a testament to a shared consciousness rather than inherent homogeneity.
A shared idea of being Chinese.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of how the idea of being Chinese, that cultural and political awareness, has become a more powerful unifying force than any natural commonality. It's truly a case of, consciousness determining being.
And that consciousness, that sense of unity, has to span an incredible geographic canvas.
Yeah.
We mentioned the size earlier, 20,000 kilometers of land borders, 18,000 kilometers of coastline.
Yeah.
From north to south, it's 5,500 kilometers. And from east to west, 5,200 kilometers. Massive distances.
And what's fascinating here is the time anomaly that arises from that immense east-west expanse.
The time zone thing.
Exactly. China has a single time zone, despite spanning 4, maybe even 5, potential time zones. Beijing time is based on the far eastern Changbai Mountains. This means that in western Xinjiang, people live by a clock that is significantly out of sync with natural daylight. Sweepers are out at 9 a.m., markets only open at 10 a.m. local time. But it's Beijing time.
So the sun might rise really late, according to the clock.
Very late. Imagine getting up for work when it's still pitch black outside for hours. It's quite strange.
Wow. China also has around 5,000 islands, but 2 really stand out. Taiwan and Hainan. Let's talk about Taiwan first.
Taiwan, covering about 35,788 square kilometers, is unique. It is, for all practical purposes, a completely separate state, the Republic of China, or ROC, where Chiang Kai-shek's government fled after the Civil War.
Right. The ROC.
What's truly fascinating is that Taiwan, the ROC, actually held China's seat in the UN until 1972.
I didn't realize it was that late.
Yeah. Since then, countries must choose to recognize either the PRC or ROC. Today, only a few nations, like the Vatican and various Caribbean and Pacific Island nations, formally recognize Taiwan, and that list is shrinking.
Yet, despite this lack of widespread formal recognition, Taiwan is an undeniable economic success story, isn't it?
It truly is, perhaps, the most successful of such unrecognized or partially recognized states. It's a major global economy with strong GDP per capita and significant gold reserves. A real powerhouse.
And the relationship with the mainland? It's complex.
Oh, incredibly complex. And here's where you see a very Chinese thing. Complex, multi-layered relations. Despite the political non-recognition, there are incredibly practical ties, direct flights, huge amounts of trade, significant economic and academic exchange.
I've heard some amusing anecdotes about how the mainland officially refers to Taiwan.
Oh, absolutely. The PRC treats Taiwan as if it's just another province, even having a Taiwan province delegation in parades.
Really?
Yes. And state media would famously refer to the RAC president as a provincial head, even using subtitles to relabel their official title.
That's awkward.
Taiwan historically also had its own absurdities, maintaining a government in exile for various mainland provinces for decades. Currently, Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, tends to view Taiwanese identity as distinct from Chinese identity and is actively moving away from that historical connection, which naturally causes recurrent tensions with Beijing.
And Hainan.
Hainan, for its part, is a much less politically charged island, about 34,380 square kilometers, roughly the size of Taiwan. It's basically China's tropical tourist escape, like their version of Hawaii, but nothing particularly complex compared to the whole Taiwan situation.
Okay. What about the South China Sea Islands? That's an ongoing battle for control with many of China's neighbors, right? A real flashpoint.
Yes, these around 200 uninhabited coral islands and reefs represent a significant additional region for China. There are ongoing and quite heated territorial disputes with Vietnam, the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, and Taiwan.
In China's approach.
China has aggressively pursued claims since the early 20th century. China's strategy seems clear. Building powerful military bases on artificial islands, literally dredging sand to create land.
Artificial islands.
Yeah. Supported by massive cement production and using what are widely considered aggressive, historically dubious 9-line claims to gain territory.
And why? What's the strategic importance?
Huge strategic importance. Key trade routes pass through there, plus potential oil and gas reserves. This is also a prime example of China's broader, consistent approach to its neighbors, according to the source material.
How so?
Almost all of China's neighbors have outstanding territorial claims from China. It serves as powerful leverage. While we are friends, we can close our eyes. But if you are not our friends, then the situation may change. It's a tool in the diplomatic toolkit.
Interesting. And before we get into the plateaus, we should quickly mention China's key peninsulas, right? Just to round out the coastal geography.
Yes, good point. There's Liaodong, famously home to Port Arthur. Shandong, often called the cradle of civilization and Confucius's birthplace. And finally, Lizhu to the far south, pointing towards Hainan.
Okay, now let's turn our attention inland to China's ancient earth, starting with the truly vast Tibetan Plateau. the roof of the world.
The Tibetan Plateau is an enormous mountainous region in the southwest, covering more than a quarter of China's territory. A huge area.
A quarter.
And the average altitude is 4 kilometers, about 13,000 feet.
So high.
This extreme height means an extremely harsh climate. You get Siberian winters despite being in subtropical latitudes. Very tough conditions.
Right.
It's sparsely populated and has historically been isolated, producing, as we mentioned, some of the toughest nomadic warriors who raise unique animals like yaks.
And you mentioned the CIA connection earlier.
Yes. Interestingly, the source notes that CIA-trained Tibetan militants in the 1950s were apparently very aware of all the latest models of assault rifles and submachine guns, a surprising detail.
Definitely.
And perhaps this harsh environment, this isolation, contributed to Buddhism reaching its, let's say, highest degrees of philosophical and spiritual achievement there. A testament to the resilience forged by such extreme conditions.
Then there's the Mongolian Plateau, further north.
Yeah.
Another land of steppes and historically invaders.
Right. Characterized as a classic steppe, it's dry and cold, with agriculture possible in very few places, mostly relying on irrigation.
So mostly nomadic life.
Exactly. This environment dictated the nomadic pastoralist lifestyle of its inhabitants, centered on sheep. And it really challenges the notion that pastoralism is somehow less progressive than agriculture. It's simply a necessary adaptation for survival in these conditions. You farm where you can, you herd where you must.
Makes sense. And its historical significance.
Huge. Historically, this plateau was the source of a constant threat of nomadic invasion from the north. Until the advent of gunpowder, the nomad on horseback almost always outmatched the settled farmer in battle.
Right. Mobility and archery.
Exactly. China was fully conquered by nomads twice by the Mongols and the Manchus, both originating from or near this region. Nomadic empires needed donor regions like China to raid and sustain themselves, creating this completely inseparable, often antagonistic connection between settled China and the nomadic north.
A constant push and pull. Finally, we come to the Loess Plateau, often called the cradle of Chinese civilization. What's special about Loess?
This plateau, about 400,000 square kilometers, is indeed considered the cradle of Chinese civilization due to its loess. Loess is this extremely fertile yellow clay, or silt, really. It's wind-blown dust accumulated over millennia.
Okay, fertile.
Very fertile, but also very easily eroded. The Yellow River, the Huanghe, flows through this plateau, carrying the fertile loess downstream to the middle and lower plains.
Like the Nile in Egypt.
Exactly like the Nile. It constantly increases the fertility of the fields through silt deposition during floods. This natural fertilization essentially predetermined that this would be a good place for the emergence of an early agricultural civilization.
And visually.
It's known for its unique, highly decorative landscapes, deep gullies, and bizarre figures of weathering due to that erosion. And a fascinating cultural detail.
Yeah.
The loess is so compacted yet so easily cut, almost like hard cheese, that the local population traditionally lived in caves dug into the hillsides.
Cave dwellings, like hobbits.
Exactly like hobbit-like dwellings. Or maybe think of the Lars homestead on Tatooine in Star Wars, dug right into the Loess cliffs.
That's incredible.
And it has recent historical significance, too. The city of Yan'an on the Loess Plateau was the Communist Party's headquarters, their special region, from the mid-1930s to mid-1940s.
Right, during the Long March era and after.
Exactly. Mao Zedong and his comrades lived in these very caves. And apparently, the proximity of their caves to Mao's own cave even determined their political influence well into the 20th century, where your cave was mattered.
Wow, talk about location, location, location. What an incredible deep dive. We've peeled back so many layers, moving far beyond any initial monolithic perception of China.
Definitely.
It's just so clear how profoundly its geography, the sheer scale, the population pressures, the diverse landscapes has shaped human life, culture, and history across this vast and incredibly varied nation.
Indeed. From the grand, sometimes brutal demographic experiments that reshaped its population structure, to the complex interplay of its many ethnic groups, many with ancient histories, and the strategic importance of its geographical features. China is a country defined by its internal heterogeneity as much as its impressive scale.
So what does this all mean for the future? That's the big question, isn't it? Given these deep-seated historical and geographical divisions and the persistent challenges facing such a vast and varied population, the demographics, the ethnic tensions, the environmental pressures, how will China continue to navigate its path forward, maintaining a sense of unity amidst such inherent diversity?
That is the question. It's a profound challenge that only time will answer.
A truly provocative thought to leave our listeners with, and that's just the beginning of our exploration into the physical world of China.
Absolutely. Next time, we'll delve even further into China's other significant geographical features. Its imposing mountains, its vast deserts, and the life-giving rivers that have shaped its destiny. We're just scratching the surface of this incredible, complex country.